he created this sound world that was so in depth and so fascinating that I wanted to live inside it longer. That was the beginning of the obsession and how we got to sort of this point where I've commissioned a whole album of music for this wild multiplicity of instruments.
That's Rebekah Heller talking about a composition for 7 bassoons that Felipe Lara wrote for her in 2015. Since then, Heller, a bassoonist and conductor, has gone on to commission several more works for multiple bassoons. Her album Righteous Rage includes music by Steve Reich, Brittany Green, Julius Eastman, and others, in which she plays all of the parts on every track. The result is a unique, rich sound that's not like any other ensemble. This is Classical Gas, a podcast series produced by Classical Voice North America. I'm Gail Wein. So, Rebekah, you don't make it easy for an interviewer to focus. You're a performer, composer, conductor, teacher, commissioner. Which one of these hats stands out for you the most?
Yes, this is an interesting moment because for the first time I am sort of on the knife's edge of two very different paths. One is continuing my passion as commissioning and performing solo bassoon music and performing passion projects of mine on the bassoon, and still with my beloved band, International Contemporary Ensemble. And then it's a burgeoning conducting career. So I'm really excited to be sort of doing half and half right now, but hoping to transition in the next few years to more conducting than performing.
Well, how did you get into conducting? How did that first happen?
It's a really funny story. It was almost an accident. I never really thought about being a conductor. I always admired conductors, and I was always also quite a leader in rehearsals. And for years in International Contemporary Ensemble, would act as a leader not only of commissioning programs and through my time as co-artistic director, but just taking a leadership role in rehearsals. But back in 2021, I was working with the New World Symphony on a program that I would come down and perform and coach on. And I was just sort of like brainstorming, and I was like, oh, this piece, it's a quintet, I'll play. This piece, I'll coach. And then I looked at a newer piece and I was like, oh, this is very large. It's a lot of people. It's going to need a conductor. I'll just conduct. A sort of inefficiency mindset, in the way like everybody wears all the hats in the ensemble. So I didn't think much of it until about a month before the concert, when I was like, oh, I should really learn what this piece is. And then I realized that like, it's not casual, this is like a Frank Gehry Hall. This is like the subscription orchestra of South Florida. And there were going to be a lot of people up there, notably the founder of New World Symphony, Michael Tilson Thomas, who's an incredible conductor. So I was like, well, I better figure out what I'm doing. And so I did as best I could in preparing. And the concert happened, and the process and the concert were just so exceedingly joyful. I didn't expect that. It's like it woke something up in me. I was so present. I was so connected. And it made me realize that the work of a conductor is kind of the work I had been doing all along in my career, which is to act as a translator between the vision of the composer to the ensemble, and then with the ensemble as a translator to the audience. So it felt like everything just sort of clicked for me. And that's sort of when I got the bug, and haven't turned around since then.
Yeah, and that was only a few years ago. It wasn't that long ago.
Yeah, about 5 years ago now.
Yeah.
Almost to the day.
So it's unusual enough to have a career as a bassoonist, but you have taken it to the next level with performances and recordings with multiple bassoons. Sometimes the multiple bassoons are you. What gave you the idea to perform and also commission music in which you've overdubbed yourself multiple times?
Yeah, I'm obsessed with it. I really am. I think the origin of this obsession for me, it goes back to 2015. I was working with a composer named Felipe Lara, amazing Brazilian composer. And we had talked about working on a piece together. And he had this idea that he wanted to write for solo bassoon with a choir of 6 bassoons and contrabassoons. And I was like, that's crazy, but cool. Let's go. And so he wrote this piece called Meta Fagote, which is Portuguese. Fagote is bassoon in Portuguese, and sort of meta bassoon. It's the new instrument that you can create with the sound of 7 bassoons. And it was an 18-minute long piece. It's a tour de force, and it's the centerpiece of my second album, which is called Meta Fagote. And he created this sound world that was so in depth and so fascinating that I wanted to live inside it longer. That was the beginning of the obsession and how we got to sort of this point where I've commissioned a whole album of music for this wild multiplicity of instruments.
Yeah, and we're going to talk about that in depth a little bit, but I'm curious, what are the challenges of playing with yourself?
I think there are way more upsides than challenges, because it's easy to be in tune with yourself. It's easy to be in time with yourself. The challenges, I think, of any multi-track recording are really similar, which is like, how does this all make sense? It's all in the mixing. In fact, I'm driving myself and my sound engineer insane with the mixing because, especially for a piece with 10 bassoons, how do you piece apart the sonic space for all those instruments to be heard and sound like something when it can just be sort of a wall of overtones? So that's been the biggest challenge of this project, is in the intricacies of mixing it in post.
And when you do play with 6 other live bassoonists, what are the challenges there? And is it more or less difficult or equal?
In a way, depending on how hard the piece is, playing with live bassoons is much easier because you have the flexibility to sort of let the tempo breathe and to ebb and to flow and to feel one another. Of course, it's much harder because everyone has a really different sound and a different way of making sound and different presence and dynamics. So finding the group sound, first of all, finding 6 bassoonists who are free on any given day, and then finding enough time to rehearse to make this sort of ensemble make sense is challenging, but it's so cool. I think hearing that many bassoons live in person will honestly like rearrange your atoms. It's the most special experience. So anytime I have the chance to sort of play in and among many bassoons, I will take it in a heartbeat. But then the challenges of playing a piece that is multi-tracked means that, of course, you have less flexibility in performance because you have to play with a click track. So you're sort of set into the rigid sort of tempo or scheme that has been laid out before you in the sort of music -1 version of these ensemble pieces that I make for live performance. So that could be also really tricky and super challenging.
Yeah. I think I mentioned to you in an email back in the 80s, I played in a bassoon band of 20 people, a couple of contrabassoons, one percussionist, one conductor in Missouri. And it was really the coolest thing I had ever done up to that moment.
Yeah, that sounds like the coolest thing one could ever do, in my opinion.
Anyway, I digress. I read that you have started a bassoon ensemble commissioning project. Is that going on?
Mm-hmm. It is going on. So the sort of second gateway drug into the bassoon ensemble project was a really New York City kind of coincidence, which is my husband and I moved into our current apartment on the Lower East Side in 2016. It's been 10 years. Around that time, I was working with a composer in my apartment, and he left my apartment, and 5 minutes later, I got a text from him with a selfie of him in my elevator with Steve Reich, the composer Steve Reich. And he was like, guess who your neighbor is? And I was like, are you kidding me? So when I met him, I said, hey, it's so nice to meet you, and I'm pretty sure you bought the apartment that I wanted. And he thought that was really funny. So I became good friends with him and his wife, Beryl, who's an incredible visual artist. And then, the pandemic happened and the world paused, and it became a passion project of mine to play a piece by Steve Reich. So I started really getting into all his repertoire, and I fell in love with a piece, one of his counterpoint pieces, which is for solo instrument and many instruments, called Cello Counterpoint. And so I mentioned it to Steve, and I said, I think this would sound really great on bassoon. And as I was working on actually recording it, he suggested that the title be Grand Street Counterpoint, since that is the street that we live on the Lower East Side. So that's out as a single, and that will be a sort of featured piece on the full-length album. But that was the sort of second piece that got me really engaged with that. This is a whole project. This is a whole thing moving forward, and there's something really there.
Yeah. So was it after that you commissioned the other works on the album by Jesse Cox, Faye Victor, and Brittany Green?
Yes, this sparked my imagination, and I got me thinking, who are the other composers that I want to hear? I started with folks who I've worked with before and whose language compositionally I really love. Jesse Cox, he was one of the first people I reached out to, and he wrote a piece really quickly and shot it off to me, and that's a really cool piece. And then also Brittany Green was someone I had worked with through International Contemporary Ensemble as well. And it turns out that the other piece on the album that I worked on as an arranger, not a composer, is this piece by Julius Eastman called The Holy Presence of Joan of Arc, which is this wild, massive, 18-minute long piece for 10 cellos. And Clarice Jensen did a painstaking reproduction because there was no score that survived. So I used her written transcription to create an arrangement. And then Faye Victor, she wrote this beautiful, like heartbreakingly beautiful, really complex and interesting piece called Nurtured for Ingram, which is for her late, great, dear friend Ingram Washington.
What do you think the greatest challenge for composers to write in this genre is?
I love that you referenced bassoon ensemble as a genre. I'm here for it. Let's go.
You made it. You made it a genre.
I love that. Yeah. I mean, the bassoon is a beast of an instrument. I've been playing it for, 35 years now, and I find a new sound every day. There's no end to the sort of like quote unquote extended techniques and multiphonics and sound world, much less all of the cool things the bassoon can do. So like, flutter tongue and glissandos and playing super, super, super weirdly soft. So I think just understanding all the things it can do is really challenging, but I always try to have a personal relationship with the composers I'm commissioning, so they know they can shoot me a text while they're composing, and I will respond in 30 seconds with a voice memo of the sound that they're curious about, or I don't know about that, but what about this, kind of back and forth.
So one of the things that makes you distinctive as a performer is that when you're performing as a soloist, you make use of immersive environments, custom lights, commission the clothing, which all looks really cool. So you approach live performances like a rock musician. And why shouldn't it be? Why shouldn't everybody do that if that's what they want to do? I was thinking, I can't think of any rock musician who decides to approach a live performance the way a classical musician typically does. Very staid, doesn't talk to the audience, just comes out and plays and goes away. So at what point did you realize, oh, hey, I can do that?
Yeah, I mean, it's such a kind of stuffy world, right? But it's funny that you kind of have to escape it. I think just the sort of inherited way we learn Western, European art music. The way that tradition is passed down has some modernization to do, has some growing up to do. I think that I had to unlearn a lot of that before I felt the freedom to be like, oh, this is actually really just an act of self-expression. Like if I'm not really committed to that, what's the point, right? This is super weird music. It's super personal for me because, I make relationships with composers for the music that I'm playing, and I get really deep into it, and I memorize pieces, and I play with lighting and clothing and all that stuff because humans are visual creatures, and so why shouldn't, the visual be just as considered as the sonic? And far too often it's really overlooked or it's seen as a distraction. And I think it's super essential. It also helps me get into this space of performer, of really sort of offering an experience that is above and beyond the weird sounds that you'll hear out of my instrument for the next hour or however long. But I also try to keep it casual, and I really like to bring people in also and like go deep and tell the story of how this piece came to be, or like what my relationship to this piece is, or what you should listen for in this piece, because I guess as an audience member that always enhances my experience. So I try to bring that as well and not just be sort of untouchably, performer-ly.
When you tell someone you just met that you play bassoon, and they say, "What's that?" What do you tell them?
I used to say it's like a big, awkward clarinet, but my husband has a great term. He calls it a steampunk didgeridoo.
I love that.
As a reference point. And, you can't really argue with that. I use that quite a bit these days.
I love that. That's so great. My favorite interview question is there anything I haven't asked you that you want to talk about?
Oh boy, Gail, give me a subject. No, I'm just kidding. I will say I have my bassoon ensemble album, Righteous Rage, coming out July 3rd on Cantaloupe Music, which I'm very excited about. So I think instead of a big show right away, I'm going to do several small pop-up shows in the Lower East Side around then. So stay tuned for that. And then August 17th, I'll be conducting a really big program at the Time Spans Festival with my group International Contemporary Ensemble. So that's a great one to go to.
Fantastic. We'll keep our eyes out for performance announcements and for the album release. Rebekah, thank you so much for taking the time to talk with me.
Thanks so much, Gail. It's been such a pleasure.
Bassoonist and conductor Rebekah Heller. This is Classical Gas. I'm Gail Wein, producer and host of this podcast series. Thanks for listening.